about to introduce, so I appreciate it. And Julie represents primarily the East End community of Saline County. But Julie, does your district go outside of East End proper, or what are your
It
geographical
does.
territories?
It's really the eastern third of Saline County. So I do have some of Bryant, Shannon Hills, Sardis, East End, and then I have some of the landmark area in Pulaski County, a short little section, but I do have some of Pulaski County.
Okay, very good. Well, let's talk about it's House Bill 1060. Is that right?
Yes, 1061, actually.
1061, okay. House Bill 1061. Why don't you start off by telling us, I'm pulling it up on my laptop, but tell us what it does, what the title is, and just why it is that you chose to sponsor this piece of legislation.
Sure. The act is called the No Patient Left Alone Act, and it hopefully will do exactly what it says, is to make sure that there is never a patient that does not have an advocate, a family member, a friend, someone who is looking out for their welfare, making sure that they're always there. And what we are seeing because of coronavirus is visitors, caregivers not being allowed to escort and be with their loved one while in the hospital, in a doctor's clinic, in hospice care, in long-term care facilities, and that just shouldn't be. Everybody needs someone with them. If you are sick, you will struggle to communicate and to understand what anybody is trying to tell you. You can't tell someone what your past medical history is. You can't tell someone what you're allergic to. You can't even tell someone why you're there. When you're sick and you're going into the ER, it's very difficult to communicate that without someone else there to help make sure. And you also can't monitor everything that's going on. And you need that other set of eyes and ears to help see from another perspective of what's taking place there. Every day I get a phone call or an email or, read a friend of mine's post about struggles on this issue, and we need to do something about it.
So reading through the bill, is this just going to apply in times of emergency, or when would it apply? You've got COVID-19 specifically referenced in here. So what are the parameters of when this would apply?
It would apply all the time. So even after the emergency goes away, this would still apply. We just want to make sure that whatever in the future happens. And so I'm trying hard to say, this is not just COVID-19. It might be something else 2 years from now or 3 years from now. We don't ever want to go through this again. We want to have these protections for families.
One of the now also we're talking along the hospital setting, but you have long-term care facilities in the bill, which means nursing homes, residential care facility, post-acute head injury, retaining residential facility, and assisted living facility, and intermediate care facility for individuals with developmental disabilities, which that would be the human development centers.
Correct. So actually this bill started off really from a phone call from someone who had a minor child with autism and other severe disabilities that's in one of these long-term care facilities. I don't want to give names, but it's her minor child. She willingly put her child into this long-term care facility. This is not some bad mom that can't be around her child. She's a single mom. She has other children. It became very difficult during the week to care for both and to meet all the needs. Every weekend, she would go pick up her daughter and bring her home. She loves her daughter. She wants to be around her daughter. She called me about a month after all this pandemic started saying, I'm not being allowed to see my minor child. And my heart just stopped. That's almost borderline kidnapping. What do you mean you can't see your minor child? And so that kind of got the ball rolling way back then. Then I had another situation where in December of 2019, I gave a citation to a man who was having a huge 100th birthday party. The church was filled with family and friends, so excited to be celebrating his 100th birthday. This is a man who was a war hero. The accolades, the awards that he has are tremendous. He came home. He was a pastor, loved man, dedicated his life to serving people. Not too long after that, the family had to put him into a nursing home. And then this pandemic happened. And from what I understand, he was begging to see his family, and he couldn't see his family. That's tragic. You can't say goodbye to your family. So that's actually how it started. It started more long-term care facility, but then I personally experienced my husband in May had to have brain surgery. He had most of his pituitary removed, and I wasn't allowed in the hospital. I had to drop him off in the lobby and say goodbye. And luckily, I was allowed in for 1 hour after he had surgery, after he was in ICU and kind of recovered and all that. But that was it. 1 hour I was allowed in there. Had it been the week before, I wouldn't have been allowed in at all. And he also was put into the ICU. He had the same surgery about 2 years before, and he was moved to a regular room. Well, he needs, after this very delicate procedure, he needs to have someone with him. So instead of being able to put him into a regular room where I'm there to help him eat, help him do whatever he needs to do, get clothes on or move around in his bed or whatever, he then had to be put into an ICU room because he needed that more immediate attention. Well, we can't do that with everybody. We need ICU rooms for other patients. So this is not the best care scenario for our patients. We are not putting our patients first, meeting their needs, and sitting in I had to sit out in the car. I sat in the car all day long while he was having this procedure until they let me come in, and it was just gut-wrenching. And then I couldn't see him. Like I said, I was allowed in for 1 hour. And then the next day when he was being released, or 2 days later, I picked him up. They brought him to the car. Then moving forward, I personally had surgery. That's a whole different story, went through a scenario. But the biggest picture is that my daughter she has spina bifida. She's 18 years old, and she spent nearly 3 months in the hospital, had 12 different procedures during this time period. And luckily, because she is a minor, well, actually, she's an adult, but luckily, because it was at Children's Hospital, she's under 21, I was allowed to be there the whole time. And if Children's Hospital can do it and allow a loved one to come in, why can't the other hospitals do it? If you have, personally, Kim, I've not heard that Children's Hospital is responsible for some type of widespread outbreak of COVID-19 because they were allowing a caregiver to come into a clinic appointment or into the hospital. So if they are able to do it safely, then why can't the other hospitals do it? If I had not been there, I don't even want to think of what could have happened. She had wonderful care, wonderful doctors, wonderful nurses, but they are not in the room with her 24/7. She was vomiting constantly, and she cannot move easily. She has spina bifida. She's paralyzed. And if you're vomiting and you're laying down, you could choke on your own vomit. And you don't have a 5 or 10 minute window to press a button and say, I need help. I had to be there, I'm hearing her and immediately there to assist her. And I just, and there were many other situations that were like that if I wasn't in the room, I don't know what would have happened. And I don't expect nurses to be in a room 24/7 for every patient. They can't. So caregivers provide a lot of care. And that's why I want to protect it. At some point, she's going to be 21. And I don't know what I would do if she was in a hospital that I couldn't go in and help her.
Some of the challenges, I know under directive, I think of the Department of Health, or maybe under the directive of the federal government, or best practices, part of the concern for facilities is limiting the number of people who come in for the purpose of COVID not being brought in with people given to patients, and it create an outbreak within the hospital system, given the strain that is on the facilities now, their staff. How do you address that response as far as not contributing to a problem of an outbreak because somebody is allowed to move in and out of the hospital and bring it in with them?
Well, I again will point out that at Children's Hospital, we did that safely for 3 months. I was allowed to go into the hospital. I was actually also allowed to leave. There was no requirement that if I came in, I wasn't allowed to leave. I had my temperature checked. I was screened every time I walked in. And of course, I'm going to be careful. If I left the hospital, I left the hospital for about 2 or 3 hours to go home and see my other children and came back. I think caregivers are going to be extremely careful about being around other people, even more so than doctors and nurses who are going home and possibly going to be around other people and shopping at Walmart or, wherever they are. Other people are coming in and out. I'm also making sure, that it's one person that's allowed in the room. I understand you don't want to bring in, the same visitor policy in that situation. Before you could bring several people into a room. I've been in hospital rooms where there's, 10 visitors all in the room at once. And I understand that. This bill is not going to say you can have a party in your hospital room. That would ensure that there's less, opportunity for the spread of it. If you want to screen me every time, if you want to swab my nose before going in, that's fine. But let someone come in and be with that patient. This is putting the patient's care first by giving them the advocate there. I'll give you some other situations. I know of a gentleman who has spoken to me, and he had to leave his wife at the hospital at the lobby. She had a doctor's appointment. His wife could barely walk, and she was very confused as to where to go. But he had to walk out of the hospital and hope that his wife gets to where she's supposed to go without falling and navigating a hospital. You've been in hospitals, some of them are pretty hard to figure out where do you go. It's easy to get lost in them. As a matter of fact, she did get lost. And luckily someone saw her who knew her and was able to ask, where are you trying to go? And then got her to the right spot. That's gut wrenching hearing those situations that, someone's not allowed to escort you to the room. I also have another person who called me who had to, she brought her husband to the ER, and they did allow her into the ER with him, but they wanted to admit him, and she was told she couldn't be with him as he got admitted. Well, this gentleman can't hear, and he gets confused very easily, an older gentleman, and she went against the advice of the doctor. And she said, no, I'm just going to bring him home instead because I can't trust what's going to happen here. So having to refuse medical care that was needed to observe him for, whatever amount of time, she's having to make the gut-wrenching decision. Instead, I'm going to bring you home because I can't trust what's going to happen. Her husband doesn't understand what's going on around him, so.
And just to make sure people understand, it's the not trust what is going to happen isn't a negative reflection on the facility or the staff, because the staff is doing everything that they can under these difficult times. It's just a matter you can't be all places at all time. And when you've got a special situation like somebody who is hearing impaired or visually impaired, you want to advocate by their side that's going to be able to represent their interest.
Exactly. I don't think there's any doctor or nurse that's trying to do harm. I mean, that's the oath that they take. But again, they can't be there 24/7, and they don't know this person. You have a different nurse on every 12 hours, and you're not even guaranteed if you're there for a week or two that you have the same nurse. You're going to have possibly a different nurse every day. And so they're coming in, they don't know anything about you and may not really know how to communicate with you. I also have someone who called me and told me that, that this loved one who ended up passing away had malnutrition. And she said, if I was able to be in there, I know what food he would likely eat. And I know what to say to get him to eat X, whatever that food is. A nurse doesn't know this person, and the person doesn't know the nurse. There's a communication that's missing there. And so we want to make sure that people are, this is not just about holding someone's hand, although I truly believe that mental health is a big part of the medical help that is needed. But this is about good medical care. And I do understand, I don't want our hospitals to have widespread COVID-19 being shared from room to room. That's not at all the goal. I think that there can be some type of compromise to make sure that we are putting the patient first and allowing them to have another set of eyes, another set of ears in that room for them.
You talk about the mental health. Every Saturday morning, or nearly every Saturday morning, I visit with a family whose loved one is in a nursing home, and we visit through the glass. And the lack of physical touch, the ability to be even though you can see somebody. In fact, I was having a conversation in Iverson with somebody yesterday about this. Fist bumping, elbow bumping, airwaves, all that stuff. It's a good gesture, but when you're a hugger, there isn't anything that replaces a good hug. And I think that's just the way God wired us. I think that's just the way God made us, that, if you're not offended by a hug, it's okay for you to be hugged. That physical touch carries such a healing value to it and an emotional value to it that, it can help people in the recovery process. But every Saturday morning, I'll visit this family at 9 o'clock, the husband, the son. We sit on one side of the glass and she's on the other side of the glass. And, that is good, but we all long for the day when, they can be in the presence of each other.
Right.
So some of the obstacles that you're running up against, you always have obstacles when you run a bill. There's always, a counter argument to what you're trying to do. So what are some of the counter arguments that you're running into, and what are some of the pathway forwards to deal with some of those counter arguments, if you don't mind talking about them, if you see them?
Sure. And we're working on it. We are trying to work with the Hospital Association and the Nursing Home Association to come up with something that would protect their interest. And I hate to be in the shoes of hospital administration during this time. I don't think that they are, happy that they're telling someone you can't come in. I don't think they're saying, oh, this is, wonderful. And they have compassion, and I think they understand, but they do have to look out, that they're not spreading COVID-19 in their hospital to their other patients, or even to the nurses and medical professionals that are all coming in. I get that, but we've got to find a fine line of what's the balance there. And there is some concern that the federal government, has certain policies that if we put this into place and they're out of compliance with federal regulations. And, on a state side, we can't do anything about the federal government. So that's what we're trying to address and figure out what is the nitty gritty on that, and how we can help those hospitals follow those guidelines, but also provide the care that we so desperately want in our hospitals. So that's the biggest challenge. And I've been sent an amendment to look at, and I've had several people kind of look at it to figure out, okay, this is what's being asked, and where's the compromise there? So that's what we're working on. I did put an amendment in last week. I think it ran on Thursday or Friday. And some other things that I added in there. I was requested to add in clergy. You mentioned, you visiting the nursing home and all that. And a lot of people, especially if we're talking about end of life, they want to speak to their pastor. I know we have lots of chaplains in the hospital, but they want to speak to their pastor, and they're also not being allowed into the hospital. And so we want to allow that so that they can pray with them in person or just speak with them. It's just sad. So that was another thing that we did add in there.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want people to know about House Bill 1061? If you want to read it in its entirety, the way you find it is you go up to the legislative website, which is www.arcleg.state.ar.us. That's www.arcleg.state.ar.us. And you can go up there, and there's a place where you can type in the House bill number right there at the top of the page. Just type in HB 1061. It'll pull up, and you can read it in its entirety. I noticed that you have Senator Breanne Davis as the
Yes.
co-sponsor on the Senate end.
Yes, and we're working together. Like I said, we're going to meet Tuesday, in person to discuss what's our next step and where is the compromise. And I believe that we will get something through. Everybody has to give a little, and whatever we can get forward is more than we probably have right now, I believe. I will say I don't know of any other state that has passed something just like this. I know in North Carolina back in June, they had a similar bill. It went through the Senate, passed overwhelmingly, then went to the House. I believe that the House changed a lot in it, and then the Senate didn't confer with the House amendments because it pretty much gutted the bill. And so nothing got passed there. I think Virginia is also working on something, is what I've been told. So, we are not the only state that's trying to look at this issue. I encourage listeners to reach out to their state legislator and express to them, their concerns with the bill or why they like the bill. I am not so set that this is exactly what we need to pass. What's written there, I'm open to ideas. There is nothing else for us. Kim, a lot of times there's a bill in another state that passed, and so then we kind of pattern the bill after that. Well, there isn't that right now. We're starting from scratch, and I know I can't think of every scenario, and we don't want to make something that in some ways harms the situation too. So I'm open to an idea to make it more palatable, but also accomplishing what we want to accomplish. So I do encourage people to reach out to their legislator. I'd love to have more co-sponsors on this bill, and I appreciate your support, Kim, in helping with it.
You're very welcome. All right. Anything else you want to talk about, or any other bills you want to highlight real quick?
The other bill that probably is my other priority is House Bill 1060, and working with a few folks. Alan Clark is my co-sponsor on that on the Senate end. You're supportive of that one as well, and basically we have received PPP loans. They are forgiven, many small businesses around the state. And they are forgiven loans from the federal government. But if we don't pass this bill or something along this lines, everyone's going to have state income tax on that. And for some companies that received, a pretty good chunk of money, that's really going to hurt their bottom line. And the federal government has been trying to tweak this. I think the intention back when this was originally passed was that you would not have federal income tax on it. But then the IRS chimed in and said, no, you're still going to have to pay the federal income tax. And the federal government has worked out a deal. But in the state of Arkansas, we do not have automatic conformity to federal on a federal level. Like whatever they do, we have to individually pass it. We aren't just going to conform to what the federal government has done. So we need to pass this. There are other things besides just the PPP that we're looking at. So I've also been working with Representative Les Eves on this, and we're just trying to figure out what's the best bill. So I don't know if this is the exact bill that will get passed, but listeners, I hope that you understand we are working on it. We know it's an issue, and we're going to try to make sure that you don't get more state income tax on these forgivable loans that have been given out this past year.
Very good. All right. We've been listening to Julie Mayberry, state representative, represents over in the East End, Shannon Hills area. Julie, your district number?
27.
27. All right. So you guys are blessed to have her over there in District 27 representing you, as you've heard today, with the bill, House Bill 1061, No Patient Left Alone Act. You can go up on the website, www.arcleg. I gave that to you a while ago, .gov.us. Anyway, you can go up there and pull down the bill and get better educated with it. And if you want to call your state legislators and just give your input, I know Julie would appreciate that. Julie, I appreciate you serving the people of the state of Arkansas, and good luck with the rest of your house cleaning today. And I hope you can get Andy in there to help you too. So,
well, hoping I can get my kids too. I think one of them's already been cleaning her bathroom, so that's good.
you did good.
I've got helpers.
You did good. So, all right.
Okay.
I will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Moving on next on the Kim Hammer Show is Iverson Jackson. Iverson, you are retired Army. What rank or what did you retire out as?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel. So we need to give you a salute then if you retired out at that high of a rank for sure. But you also pastor a church, right?
I pastor Zoe Bible Church just off of Pratt Road. There, just south of here.
Okay. How long you been in the ministry?
We've been in ministry for 30 years.
30 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. You got a little time under your belt.
Just
both,
a little bit.
How many years? Did you retire out? 25 years?
25 years in military.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And how many kids do you have?
Three.
I met one of them because you and your wife came down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You met Michaela. Michaela's the youngest. And then our two sisters, Charisma's 27 and India's 29.
Very good. They're all doing what mom and dad want them to do.
They're all doing okay.
Okay. And all the parents said amen.
Amen. Yeah.
Hey,
I tell them, hey, just be productive, seek the Lord for what he would have for your life. And I'm living my life and never try to live my life through them. Yep. And so just make sure whatever you're doing is pleasing to the Lord.
Right. And then if you need help, come see mom and dad first.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. That's
there
it.
You go.
So tell us about your military career.
Got commissioned. I went through the ROTC in Southern Arkansas University, SAU, and was commissioned there in 1983. Started out in the 321st Military Management Center. This is on the reserve side. And then moved to the 78th Train Division in New Jersey. And from there to the 95th Train Division in Oklahoma, and then back here in Little Rock to the 90th Regional Support. And in that time, had some logistic assignments and then some training assignments, and eventually retired here with the 90th Sustainment Brigade. Those were new brigades that they were setting up, and I was asked to go over and stand that up before I retired. And so I did that. The Sustainment Brigades were kind of new to where we are and what we were doing. And so we stood that up, and they shipped out, I think, 2009. And so I retired December 2008, and they shipped out in 2009. So, but have enjoyed it. The last maybe 8 years or so, I taught senior ROTC at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, UCA, UAPB, and Monticello. So really enjoyed that, training young men and women to be officers in the United States Army. And just, the reward, the biggest reward on that is when these young people get commissioned, they go off to their assignments and they call you and from across the waters and the shores and tell you how they're doing. And that is a really huge reward. And then some of them now have retired. So, that's something else to see that, and they have families. And I actually got an opportunity to marry one couple that had a student cadet at the University of Central Arkansas, and met this young lady, of course, and we did the marriage for them, and they went on off, and they may still be in there. I haven't heard from them. It's been a minute, but, you still hear from these guys that call back 10, 15 years later, and that is the greatest reward of all. Is to know that you've, impacted somebody's life and trained them, and they took that training and were able to do well with it, and they call you back and let you know it. So I don't know that there's a greater reward than teaching. That's why I love doing it.
Well, my wife is a teacher, 34-ish plus years, I think, and maybe longer. Actually longer, I think. And, it is amazing the number of students that she runs into that from years ago.
Yes.
And she's at that point where she said, you need a little help remembering, kind of like pastoring and seeing somebody from 40 years ago. I know you, but help me out here, you know? And the significant difference that people that work with school age children and the positive impact, and
Yes.
sometimes negative, but positive impact that they can have,
Yeah.
long into their future.
Yeah, that is something when working with equipment, working with all these things. That's fine. Doing cool assignments, but when you're sowing your life into people, into other people's lives, I think that is just the greatest thing that you can do. And I think anyone who's successful could probably most everyone look back and say this person, this teacher impacted me. This teacher showed me this. This teacher taught me that. This teacher, pulled something out of me that wasn't, that I didn't know was in me. This coach, or coach, I played, sports and so forth. And so all those things you're always thinking. I still think about my high school coaches and junior high coaches and elementary teachers. Those. My wife and I were talking about that just the other day, and I was talking about my second grade teacher, Miss Bedden. And I remembered her quite well. And so, and my first grade teacher, Miss Johnson, I remember her specifically, Miss Johnson, because she was, well, we would call her today. She probably wouldn't be allowed to teach today, but, because they required you to learn.
Yeah.
You couldn't just be there as a number. You had to learn. And so she didn't. These were no nonsense teachers, back in the day, and they made sure that you were educated when you left out of there. But I can still remember sitting in Miss Johnson's first grade classroom, and this was the spring of '68, and we all know what happened in the spring of '68, April, when Dr. King was assassinated. So I still remember being there in the first grade. And, all that. Back then they had a television in every room. And, of course, it stayed on Channel 2 most of the time. And so I still remember seeing that. And then, of course, going home. And the family, everybody's met at my grandmother's house. And I still remember my aunts and people just running through the yards and screaming, that, they've killed Dr. King. They've killed. I'm a 6-year-old. And I can still remember that like it was yesterday. People just grabbing their head and just running around screaming. I still remember that. So, but that's a tie to being back in my first grade classroom. So, but it was something.
It's amazing how, of which my wife just reminded me, it's 38 years that she's been
Okay.
teaching. So thank you for listening, dear. I know I
Yes.
got one out there
Yeah,
anyway.
She earned that.
Yeah, us three and her make 4. So anyway, that it's amazing, like JFK or Elvis Presley or Martin Luther King.
Right.
People that have had significant impact on society, sometimes being in very controversial moments, sometimes maybe created by them, sometimes maybe created by others, but how they handle themselves in controversial moments. And no doubt, Dr. King made a great impact. In fact, I was talking to somebody this morning about him, and one of the things that he pointed out is, remember that Dr. King was also very pro-life, and his positions were very strong on things I think that are very strong today as well.
Yes.
So let me ask you, as a African American, what do you feel today when you look back upon Dr. King's legacy? Are some of the lessons that he taught then that need to be taught now?
I think the absolute biggest one that I can see. Now, we know Dr. King. Let's say it like this. We're saying Dr. King. And I know so much of the history and civics books are saying Dr. King, but we have to remember it was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and that's being left out. I don't know. I visited his monument there in Washington, many times. And these things are it's like they're being glossed over. They don't want people to know that he was a minister of the gospel first and foremost, and so I would say that. But one of the things that I would think would be the number one thing Dr. King would say after that, faith in God, would be self-reliance. And that's really lost, self-reliance. When you look at and you read behind Dr. King, not once will you hear him talk about handouts and someone owing you something. His whole thing, from my understanding and from my reading, for what I can come to the conclusion, is just give us the same opportunity. And that's what he was saying. And I think as a free country, when we were talking about what we're talking about and the love of this country. And that is when people across the world see America, that's what they see. It's not, and I know some of this has changed recently, but what people see is opportunity. It's opportunity that if I'm willing to work, if I'm willing to produce sweat, then I can get paid for that. And so Dr. King was saying, just give us the same opportunity. We're not asking you to, to hand us out anything, because we all know that handouts do not work. They don't work on any scale. They don't work with your children. If you just give your children everything, then what you're going to do is create a bomb. That's what you'll do. You'll create a no count bomb that society will have to deal with. But you create an atmosphere, an environment where they can grow and produce for themselves and produce something that other people will be willing to invest in. Then you're gonna have some children that you can be, I would say, proud of. So Dr. King was saying, be self-reliant, and don't allow. And he again had the platform to, I might say, challenge, if you will, our system to be what it says it is, and that's equal to everybody. So when you look at the marches and things like that, they were not for handouts; they were for jobs. They're for jobs. You said we can take care of ourselves. We will work ourselves. We've been doing it for a good while. But give us the opportunity and just be treated fair. That was the whole thing. Be treated fairly like anyone else. And so I think Dr. King would be very upset with if he was here today with so many people trying to ride the system. And listen, Dr. King wasn't, when you look at any of his marches, all the rest of stuff, Dr. King always had all kinds of people around him. It was not one ethnic group. This was not for just black people. This was for all people. Dr. King was about that. And that's because if he wasn't, that would make him the same, make him just like the system that he was fighting against. So when you see Dr. King, you see all kinds of people around him all the time, white people, black people, Hispanic people. You saw all kinds of people around Dr. King because it was about everybody. So he wasn't saying give one group a special, a special advantage over another group. He's just saying treat everybody the same. So I think if Dr. King was here today, he would be very, from my opinion, he would be very upset with what he would see today, because so many people want to be given something. They want to take out but not put in. And that's a system that's going to eventually collapse in on itself. It just would never work. Would never work.
So let me ask you something. You're a minister.
Mm-hmm.
You've put your toes in the political field.
Oh, yes.
You just ran for state chairman of the Republican Party of Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
I want to commend you,
yes, sir,
and John Elf. Y'all ran a great race.
Yes.
I think you've got a valuable place, in the future.
Yes, sir.
And Dr. King was a reverend.
Yes.
But he was also in the political world, maybe not in elected status, but he was trying to make a push into the political system to make changes. How do you as a minister see the balance between being a minister and the political world?
Well, when you think about it like this, and folks would call one thing political, one thing, that's, religious world. But you say, well, where do we draw the line? Where is there a line that we draw? Because if I have to live, I don't live inside my church building, but I do live according to my faith. And if we have a governmental system that does not support the freedom of religion, then you're going to have a problem living out your faith. This is why we have the First Amendment. This is why the Pilgrims came to this land in the first place and were willing to risk everything to be here so that they could worship God according to their conscience without the dictates of the king interfering with that. So I just don't see the where people say, well, that's the political message, that you just preach. And I say, well, what makes it political? I got it out of the Bible. So if it's in between, to answer your question directly, if it's in between the pages of Genesis and Revelation, then I'm going to discuss that. I'm going to preach that. Now, if that seems to cross over into what someone else may call the political arena, then they've just got to deal with that. But I have to be obedient to my call as a minister to preach the gospel, and to my conscience, knowing that that I have to say what the Bible says. Because here we go, Kim. If all you have to do to shut me up as a minister of the gospel is say that's political, you can't talk about that in church. Well, eventually, what are we going to be talking about? Because everything in the scripture that, as I have read and understand it, helps us to be a better citizen in the world. The more laws we have in our books is an indication of our citizens need to be that need to be corralled more, because they are not following the word of God. And that's why I think it was John Adams, I may have that wrong, but he said our Constitution is for a moral and religious people, and is wholly unfit for the governance of any other. So if we don't get the ministering in the church, the teaching of the Bible in the church, those principles, then we're not going to be good citizens over here on the government side. And as well as I know, Romans 13 is one of the main chapters where it tells us that God instituted governments for that. So that's in there. And so we have to, I think both sides have to respect the other, but there can be a point where you really can't tell what side you're on. And so when I minister about abortion, and which is the name today, in the Bible, it talks about the shedding of innocent blood and child sacrifices. So when I see that in the scripture, then I see that is just the same as abortion. So am I being political? No, I'm just being scriptural. It sounds political to someone who's listened to it from a political ear, but it's just being scriptural. And that's with anything else. Jesus said, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar. So if I say, don't pay your taxes, well, that's unscriptural. Because the Bible clearly tells us to pay our taxes. It clearly tells us to obey authorities, those things. Now, we aren't to, obey something that's immoral or illegal for us to do just because the government said as a Christian that if that contradicts my faith, then no, I'm not bound to do that. But when we look at the Bible, it teaches us to be good citizens. So politicians should want ministers to preach the gospel, to preach the Bible, because it'll make their job. It'll make it easier on our justice system. The Bible tells us, thou shalt not steal, don't covet. All these things that help make us be a better citizens. Why do people want to move in a community in a gated community? They want to move there because there are a lot of folks outside that gate that don't want to obey the law. And if they were in places where they were being preached the word of God. So again, these things complement. They're not conflicting one another. They should complement one another.
I do a daily devotion,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going through Joshua right now. And Joshua, when he got ready to send the 2.5 tribes back over to the east side of Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things he commanded them is, you remember to obey the commandments and the laws,
Yes.
and to walk in the ways of the Lord, and to walk in the ways of the commands in the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little bit difficult to separate the source of where we get our commandments and where we get our laws, as evidenced by what you were just talking about. For they are passed down from God. And I think when you live in obedience to those commandments and laws, abortion,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be, I think that's when society functions better.
Yes.
But not everybody in society takes that position.
Right.
And that's where the friction comes,
Mm-hmm.
and what leads to, confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think Dr. King resolved that confrontation whenever he was trapped between being a reverend and being regarded as a political icon who was trying to achieve everything that you mentioned?
I again, from what I've studied of Dr. King, he stayed with the side that he was most familiar with, which was his what God called him into, and that is to be a minister, being guided by the scripture, if I can use that term, and his conscience of those things. And and I think anytime you do that, you're going to have some conflict, because the two lanes are going to cross at some time. So as far as being a political machine, I think he understood that that in order to get things done, you do have to cross over. You do have to talk to the political side. So, you can't just stay in your pulpit. Eventually, you're going to have to talk to other people. And so I think he understood that quite clearly. And he also knew you got to understand, what does this other side want out of me? And of course, what most, you got to have votes to be in office. We know that. You got to have support. So I think it's quite all right if you're talking to the other side, because you need to, because we're both working together. Everybody with, how shall we say, in a sense of decency, you want a good, peaceful society, because nobody thrives. No people can thrive in an environment of chaos, constant chaos and destruction. We see that, of course, in the Middle East, and we've seen it sadly, we've seen it over here in some cities for months on end now. But nothing can really grow good out of that. So he understood that you had to talk to the other side, because those are people who are making decisions. And I say this all the time to our church: get to know wherever you live, get to know your representative, call them. It's okay. Call them and talk to them. Even if they don't vote the way you want them to vote, at least get to know them. At least, they'll know who you are, because they represent you, and you need to have a voice. So yes, you can't just, like the old monks, go up in the hills or in the mountains into a monastery and just say, okay, we'll just worship God here. No, we have to live in this society. And in so doing, then you have to talk to the other side. But I think as long as you have yourself grounded in who you are, in the Word of God, then you'll be safe.
So you mentioned, when I asked you if you wanted to come on the show today, which the love of God and the love of country is one thing you want to talk on. What about the love of God? What about the love of country?
The love of God is what we have in our heart. The love of country comes from living in a country that allows us to love God the way we choose to. And just to kind of put everything into perspective of what I was saying, when I heard from you last night, and I was watching some YouTube channels, some old clips. I like to watch old clips of the Olympics and stuff like that. And just this example was I think it was 2000 Sydney Games, I believe it was, and the last race, and it was the 4x400 meter race, and the Americans won it. They won it with Michael Johnson, the twins. It was a set of twins on that same team, and then one other guy. Well, here's what I mean by love of country. The announcer was speaking to them, commentator was speaking to them after the race was over, and he talked to Michael Johnson, and then he talked to the twins, and he said to the audience, "You would not believe this, but 5 years ago, these guys were sleeping in their car." Okay? They were sleeping in their car. They had just won a gold medal. So here in a country, we live in a country where you can go from sleeping in your car, you and your brother, nowhere to live, you're sleeping in your car, to 5 years later, you're standing on a stand at an Olympic stadium receiving a gold medal representing that same country. I mean, that's America. That's America. Just before I came here, I was having a breakfast with another couple of gentlemen, and this one guy, he said, "Pastor, you wouldn't believe this, but 10 years ago, I had nothing. I had nothing." He had been, on drugs, had lost everything. Let's say it like that. But he absolutely had nothing. And today he has his own business. He made well over 6 figures last year, but he had nothing. And he was sitting there with his pastor, and he said, "It's because I listened to my pastor." So here we are in a country that will allow you to be anything that you're willing to put the work in to do. Or if you're willing to do nothing, then we have a country that allows you to be nothing if that's what you want to do. And I think if you don't allow people the room to fail, you also don't allow them the room to succeed. So I love this country because it gives you that one thing that that every man desires: freedom. Freedom to succeed and freedom to fail. And I think if we do that with people, give them the freedom to succeed and the freedom to fail, and I'll say this as a close here. What I would like to see in some legislative sessions is us, take some laws off the books, because every time I hear a law, not like what you were just talking about with Julie, that's a good one. But I'm talking about some of these things that hold back people from being all that they can be. I'd like to see some of those things come off state and federal level. Like the President Trump said, for every one regulation you put on the book, take 2 off. So give people freedom, and we'll see God working through them, and then they can be whatever they desire to be if they're willing to put in the work. So that's why I love this country.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to have you back on because,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if anybody else listening enjoyed it, but I have been inspired by it too, by the way.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you have certainly represented the thoughts that needed to be said well. And
Yes, sir.
I do count you as a personal friend.
Yes, absolutely.
He's been down to my church before. We've had fellowship before.
Mhm.
Look forward to working with you in the future
Yes, sir.
because I think you're going to have a place. And
Amen.
I appreciate you being here today. Any
Thank you
final
for
thoughts
having
you
us.
want to give?
Let's just be thankful that we have the country we have, and be willing to do what it takes to follow the Constitution, follow the Bible, to get involved with your community and serve somewhere. Serve somewhere. Serve somebody else. Don't just wrap your life up in yourself. Serve somebody.
Good word. All right. This is the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for listening today. Earlier, we had on State Representative Julie Mayberry, who is running among some of her other legislation, No Patient Left Alone. Encourage you to go up to the website, look at that. That is House Bill 1061, and had Iverson Jackson in the studio with me today as well, retired U.S. Army. And all your Army brothers out there and sisters are, encouraging you, saying thank you. And I noticed that you represent the garb well.
Yes.
Hey, one quick question. What do I got there, Steve? About a minute? One quick question. You mentioned ROTC. If you had to say something to a young man or a young girl out there that's debating whether to get involved in ROTC on their high school campus, and they are on college
Yes.
campuses too, you got 30 seconds to convince them why.
It'll be an experience that you'll never forget. You'll learn things that about leadership, about citizenship, about serving, that you're not going to learn in any other venue. And then if you go on to college and get in senior ROTC college, that's an opportunity for a career and an opportunity to serve as a leader in your nation.
Very good. You've been listening to Kim Hammer Show. Look forward to having you back on next Saturday at noon. Hope you have a great rest of the Saturday afternoon. Remember, Monday is Martin Luther King. Pause to remember his legacy and the impact that he made upon our nation. Hope you have a great afternoon.
Rock, a Salem Media Group station, 101.1 FM. The Answer.